We huddled together in the abandoned warehouse, the only light coming from our cell phones. The darkness pressed in on us, and every creak of the building made my heart jump. My wife, my son, and I tried to catch our breath, believing we had found a momentary refuge from the nightmare that was hunting us. Just as we started to feel a tiny bit safe, a flickering light caught our attention. A message was slowly appearing on the wall, as if written by an unseen hand. The words made our blood run cold. "Welcome to Disneyland." It hit us like a ton of bricks. This was no ordinary warehouse. We were in an old, abandoned Disney subsidiary building from the 80s. The place where forgotten projects and unwanted characters went to die. Paralyzing fear took hold of us. We knew immediately that this was no coincidence. The air grew thick with tension. The movement outside grew louder, and that same high-pitched, squeaky voice from the phone calls began to echo through the building. It was closer now, speaking directly outside the walls. "You messed with the wrong company, Wit," the voice sneered, dripping with obscene profanities. "Not only will we strip you of your worldly possessions, but we will devour your flesh. And your souls? They will be kept and tortured for eternity within the House of the Mouse." The voice laughed, a chilling, maniacal sound that sent shivers down our spines. We knew that escape was impossible. We had to prepare for the battle of our lives. I grabbed a metal pipe from the debris. My wife picked up a broken piece of glass, and my son armed himself with a rusty crowbar. We could hear them moving closer, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The creatures were coming for us, and there was no place left to hide. The reality of our situation sank in. We were not going to survive this, but we would fight to the end. The door to the room we were in burst open, and the grotesque, deranged Mickeys poured in. Their eyes glowed with hunger and malice, their teeth bared in horrific grins. They moved with unnatural speed, clawing and biting with savage ferocity. We fought back with everything we had. The sounds of metal striking flesh, the screams of pain, and the snarls of the creatures filled the air. Blood sprayed across the walls as we struggled to fend off the relentless onslaught. My wife was the first to fall, overwhelmed by the swarm. Her screams of agony tore through me as the creatures ripped her apart. I tried to reach her, but the Mickeys closed in, their claws raking across my skin. I managed to fend off a few, but there were too many. My son fought bravely, his face a mask of determination and terror. We were back to back, swinging our makeshift weapons, but the tide was against us. One of the creatures lunged at me, and I felt its claws sink into my shoulder. I cried out in pain and fell to the ground. Through the haze of pain, I saw my son standing over me, fighting off the creatures with all his might. The room was a blur of movement and blood, and I knew I couldn't hold on much longer. My vision started to fade, and the last thing I saw was my son's determined face as he fought to protect me. I saw my mother fall first. The way those monstrous Mickeys tore into her was beyond anything I could have imagined. Her screams were unbearable, and the sight of her blood spraying across the walls made my stomach churn. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep fighting, for her and for Dad. Dad was next. I saw him go down, the creatures swarming over him like ants on a carcass. He fought bravely, but there were too many. His cries of pain echoed in my ears as I swung the crowbar, desperately trying to keep them at bay. The room was a nightmare of blood and chaos. The smell of iron filled the air, and the sound of ripping flesh was nauseating. My own body was covered in scratches, but the adrenaline kept me going. I couldn't think about the pain or the fear. I had to survive. I felt a claw rake across my back, the pain searing and immediate. I swung around, smashing the crowbar into the face of the creature behind me. Its head caved in with a sickening crunch, but more were coming. I was surrounded. I made a break for the door, my heart pounding. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I heard my father's voice one last time, telling me to run. I burst through the doorway and into the dark corridor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The hallway seemed endless, the shadows reaching out to grab me. I could hear the creatures behind me, their high-pitched voices taunting and mocking. "You can't escape, Wit! We're going to get you!" I stumbled into another room and slammed the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock it. I backed away, trying to catch my breath. The room was filled with old, dusty props, forgotten relics of Disney's past. I knew I couldn't stay there. They would find me. I looked around, desperate for a way out. My eyes landed on an old ventilation shaft. It was small, but I was thin enough to squeeze through. I climbed up, my muscles screaming in protest. The metal was cold and sharp, cutting into my hands and knees. But I didn't care. I crawled through the shaft, every noise amplified in the tight space. I could hear the creatures below searching for me. Their voices echoed through the vents, filling me with dread. I reached an opening and peeked out. The coast was clear. I climbed out and found myself in another corridor, this one leading to an emergency exit. My heart leapt with hope. I ran towards it, my legs feeling like lead. I burst through the exit and into the night air. The relief was overwhelming, but I didn't stop running. I couldn't. I I kept going until I collapsed on the side of the road, gasping for breath. I made it out, but the nightmare was far from over. The things I saw, the horrors I endured, they haunt me every day. The police didn't believe my story. They said I was traumatized, that my mind had conjured up the monsters to cope with the tragedy. But I know the truth. Disney's dark magic is real, and it's hungry for those who dare to cross it. So if you ever think about using their images without permission, remember my family. Remember the horrors we faced. Because Disney is always watching, and if you cross them, they will find you. And there will be no happily ever after. To this day, every time I hear a high-pitched, squeaky voice, my blood runs cold, and I am reminded of the night I lost everything to the House of the Mouse.